Hey, today I want you to lend me your imagination, okay? So I'm going to give you a description or a scenario and I just want you to picture it, okay? Follow me along, okay? So picture this. It's a hot Florida night in 1989, okay? And it's somewhere along Interstate 75. A middle-aged man pulls over to pick a woman walking the highway. So he thinks he knows what he's paying for, okay? What he doesn't know is that he's about to become the first victim in a killing spree that will shatter every single assumption that America had about serial killers up to this point. So the name of the lady was Aileen Wuornos. And before we get into what she did to this man, what other crazy things did she do, what were her stances on life, what were the contents of the numerous letters that she actually wrote while in prison, you need to understand where she came from. What's her villain origin story, as some people like to put it in modern day terms. Like, what went wrong? Because this story, I feel like it does not just begin with this serial killer or this murderer. It begins with somebody being born into this world, a little girl being born into a world which does not want her, which beats her up and is so unforgiving up to the very end. Let's begin. February 29th, 1956, Rochester, Michigan. Aileen Carol Wuornos came into this world on a leap year, which feels almost symbolic given how her entire life would exist outside the normal boundaries of what we consider acceptable or even imaginable. Her father was a child molester who would later kill himself in prison. That's already like a bad beginning. What about her mom? Maybe she's the one who's going to help her out. Nope. She bailed before Aileen could even form memories of what she looked like. She just said, okay, peace out, I'm leaving. So Aileen and her brother ended up with their grandparents, and most of us have this good attitude towards our grandparents. They're caring, they're nurturing, they're better than our normal parents, right? Sadly, this was not the situation for Aileen and her brother. Now, when you hear that, you must think like the story might be getting better, right? No. A fresh start with a family who could provide stability and love, that was just simply not in the cards for Aileen, sadly. So her grandfather was a serial abuser. He beat her. Her grandmother was a drunk. And by the time Aileen was 11 years old, she had already learned that her body was a commodity that she could trade for beer, cigarettes, and money. 11 years old. Let that sink in for a second. 11 years old. Let me just ask you, what were you doing at the age of 11? Hopefully, I'm praying that you are not selling your body to get cigarettes and money. Okay? 11 you're in middle school or something. So most kids at this age are worrying about their homework and what they're having for dinner or hanging out with friends. At this point, Aileen was trading sexual favors with grown men. Again. And it's not like they didn't know that she was an 11-year-old. They knew. This was sort of like part of the fantasy, what was actually making the deal a little bit sweeter for them. I know. At 14, she got pregnant because at this point she has been doing this for 3 years, messing around with grown men without protection most likely, in order for her to get beer, cigarettes, and money to get by. So some neighbors claimed that the father was an older adult friend of the grandfather. So somebody in the age group of her own grandfather. So others state that it might actually been her own brother's. His name was Keith, by the way. So some people are saying that it was an incestuous situation, like the kid she got pregnant by her brother. The truth, however, got buried under layers of family dysfunction and other small town secrets, because others also say that the kid might actually be the grandfather's. So you see, you cannot really pinpoint who's the father actually. So what we know for sure is that she gave birth, gave the baby up for adoption, and was kicked out of her house soon after giving birth. So at 14, she started selling her body. At 11, at 14 years old, she gets pregnant and gives birth, gives up her baby for adoption, and is now homeless. At 14. Again, I want you to imagine this. What were you doing at the age of 14? So Aileen being kicked out of the house, she decided she's going to live in the woods. And at this point in the 60s and the 70s in America, hitchhiking was a major thing. So she started hitchhiking across the country using fake names. So she did whatever she had to do to survive, and we cannot blame her, okay? And by survive, we're not talking about thriving and, having a comfy bed, a warm meal, and, water to shower. No, by surviving, I mean like she's able to wake up tomorrow. That's all she wants. She wants to wake up tomorrow. She just wants something, a morsel of food to be in her stomach. She does not want to stay hungry another day. We are literally staying just the bare minimum for her to be categorized as a live person. Anyways, let's continue. So by the early 1980s, after her brother Keith, who actually died from cancer, Aileen had made her way to Florida. So she worked as a prostitute along the highways, mostly picking up middle-aged, working-class white men who wanted quick transactions in their cars or cheap motels. So this, I feel like it used to be major during the 80s. I haven't done like a deep dive or research on what is happening nowadays, but it seems like this is sort of something that happens normally. People, most likely truck drivers, pick up young ladies along the road. Maybe let's say, I need you to drop me in the next town, and in exchange I'm going to give you sexual favors. So this was not a glamorous lifestyle. This is not what the media portrays nowadays of what being a sex worker or the lady of the night to be. This was survival. Okay, so this is a young lady who, from the age of 11, has seen the worst parts of humanity, the worst parts of who men were. Because again, from 11, remember where she's coming from. Doesn't know who her dad is. Number two, knows who her dad is. I'm sorry about that, but he's a pedophile who actually kills himself in prison. The second father figure was a drunk grandfather who may or may not have been the actual father of her child, who continuously abused her and her sibling and her grandma. Other men in her life up to this point have been people who she was exchanging sexual favors to get money to buy beer and cigarettes. These are the same men in her life who got her pregnant at the age of 14, and she was forced to give birth and basically just sell her child off to be adopted because she could not be able to keep them. These are the same men who, again, going back to the grandfather, who most likely took part in kicking her out of their home. So you can obviously sort of see, I'm trying to paint a picture in which you can see where is Aileen coming from, okay? Let's continue. So her criminal record started piling up like a stack of bills. So illegal possession of a firearm, forgery, assault, robbery, prostitution, especially prostitution rather, over and over again. So this was like, cops basically knew her. The cops who arrested her would write the same thing in their notes. Attitude poor. She was angry. She was volatile. She was by all accounts a powder keg waiting for a little bit of a spark. Then in 1986, she met someone at a bar in Daytona Beach. Her name was Tyria Moore, okay? And for the first time in her chaotic, violent life, Aileen found something that felt like love. They started in an intense romantic relationship. They moved in together. Wuornos worked by the highways while Moore stayed at home, and together they pawned stolen items to make ends meet. So this is the first time that Aileen is experiencing love, okay? And she finds this deep comfort inside Tyra's arms, and she's for the first time. Life is hard, okay? We're not saying at this point she was living good. Life is still hard, but at least she's looking forward to going back home to a warm meal, to a warm smile, and spending the night with her girlfriend. So this relationship will become central to everything else that followed. If you're a true crime fanatic like me, you know that in most of this like true crime stories, life starts off really badly, and then it sort of rises for most of these people, and it sort of reaches this point where it feels like, yes, they finally get a break in life. Maybe, you know, the universe is finally just giving them a break and sort of having this happy moment for them. You feel like, yeah, maybe this is the time they change for the better, although most of the time you know like something bad is about to happen. And in Aileen's story, that's where we are now. So this was like the beginning of this episode, where we started like on a cliffhanger, maybe. So November 30th, 1989, Richard Mallory. So he's a 51-year-old repair shop owner. He picked up Aileen Wuornos along Interstate 75. Without even saying what we are doing here, between Richard and Aileen, it was understood it was money for sex. They basically knew each other. He was a client, okay? Richard was going to pay money, and you know, in exchange, he would have sexual relations with Aileen. But it seems like a simple transaction, okay? Like a barter trade, if you will. I give you money, and in exchange, I get sexual favors from you. But in this situation, it was not that simple. As Richard got into his pickup truck or his car or whatever, you know, automobile he was using at the moment, he thought it was going to be a simple thing. 10 minutes, maybe 15 max if you're being, you know, kind. And then he will go back to his life and, you know, reminisce about this 15 minutes in heaven, okay? But to that specific day, it was not that simple. Richard's body, or Mallory's body if you prefer, was found several miles from his abandoned car by a Volusia County deputy. He'd been shot multiple times in his chest. His car was gone, so were his belongings. And somewhere out there, Aileen was already becoming something she'd never been before. She was not a victim in this situation. She was no longer a survivor trying to scrape by. She had decided to become a killer. In a world of eat or get eaten, she decided that she started for the first time she wants to be the one getting to eat people. The next day, she told her girlfriend, Tyra, watch it, that she said she told her that she had killed a man. And then she kept walking the highways. We don't know how Tyra reacts to this because she does not report her to the authorities. So it's like, okay, maybe she tried to explain it like, I felt threatened, so now, I can't go to the police because, I love you and whatnot. Of course, you want to protect your loved one. So it simmers down and she goes back to her normal job. And in a perfect situation, you may think, okay, so that was the first and the last time. No. So what happened next unfolded over about a year. Between November 1989 and November 1990, 6 more men disappeared after picking up a hitchhiker or a sex worker along the highways of Florida. 6 more men. 6 more men. And the common factor or the common denominator between these 6 men is 1, they end up being found dead. 2, they were seen or they drove along the Florida highways. And the third factor was that they either had a hitchhiker or a sex worker as a passenger in their vehicles. Their bodies turned up in remote areas, particularly wooded spots of the interstate in counties scattered across central Florida. So who are these men? David Spears, 43, a construction worker. He was found nude in Citrus County on July 1st, 1990. Again, shot 6 times in the torso. Have we heard that before? Are you guys getting any similarity here? Charles Cascadon. I have absolutely butchered the second name. So he's 40. He's a part-time rodeo worker. He was discovered days after Spears in Pasco County, shot 9 times in the chest and stomach. Troy Burris. Again, I am absolutely slaughtering these names. He was a salesman. His body was found so decomposed by the time the Marion County law enforcement found it on August 4th, 1990. They could not even determine who it was or that he had been shot in the torso twice. Charles Dick Humphreys. He was a retired Air Force major, former police chief, and Florida child abuse investigator. He was found dead again in Marion County on September 12th, 1990, fully clothed, which I feel like it's a little bit different from the other victims, but the similar point or the point of conjecture is that multiple gunshots to the head and torso. Peter Sims, 65, who left central Florida heading for New Jersey in June 1990. His car was found abandoned on July 4th in Orange Springs. Witness described 2 women near the vehicle. His body never actually found. Walter Antonio. He was 62. His partially disrobed body was discovered in a remote part of Dixie County on November 19th, 1990. 4 gunshots to the back and head. His car turned up 5 days later in Brevard County. So these are multiple counties in Florida. 7 men. 7 families wondering what happened to their father, their brother, their son, their granddad, neighbor, that's random guy who says hi, what happened to them? 7 crime scenes scattered across Florida. And 1 woman was moving between them like a ghost. Obviously, the police started connecting dots. At some point, they usually start seeing a pattern, right? So items from Richard's car kept showing up at pawn shops around Florida. As I said, Richard was the first victim. So after, getting his body and, going through the whole process, they start doing investigation and something weird kept happening. Why is a dead guy's belongings showing up at pawn shops in Florida? And every time they traced an item, it led back to the same person. Okay, at this point, even if you are the thickest person ever or the most dense person alive, you will start asking questions. So somebody dies, right? We do not know who killed him. His body is found far away from his car, and his belongings are stolen, right? Okay. Then you conduct investigations, and there's no lead. A few months later, his belongings start showing up around pawn shops in the same state that he was killed. You follow up on these pawn items you ask pawn shop owners, so where did you get these things? Of course, most of the time pawn shop owners, they are free and willing to obviously state that, okay, so I got this from this woman. And they're like, okay, so it all leads back to the same person. And it's not once, not twice. It happens multiple times. So a thumbprint on a pawn receipt, a camera found in a rented storage unit, fake names, that all All of this belonged to one person. Aileen Wuornos wasn't exactly covering her tracks carefully. She was not like being this mastermind, going out of her way to make sure she's leaving all stones unturned or making sure that nobody could ever trace this back to her. She was spawning this man's belongings in broad daylight, leaving fingerprints using the same aliases over and over again. It was almost like part of her didn't actually care. Like she wanted to get caught at some point. Or maybe she just never thought that she would. She maybe thought, at this point you want to, I'm trying to comprehend. She's leaving fingerprints. She's using the same aliases. She's doing her businesses in broad daylight. She's leaving fingerprints. It's either one, she just didn't care and actually wanted to, finally be done. Get some peace, get some, let this heavy burden be relieved from her. Or she thought that she was the smartest person and nobody could actually trace it back to her. So by late 1990, her girlfriend had become more than suspicious. She knew. She moved back to Pennsylvania to live with her family, putting distance between herself and whatever Aileen had become. Now comes the arrest. January 9th, 1991. A biker bar called The Last Resort in Harbor Oaks, Florida. That's where they found her. Aileen Wuornos was arrested on an outstanding warrant. Nothing dramatic. Just another arrest for a woman who'd been arrested dozens of times before at this point. But this time it was a little bit different. The police had tracked down Tyra in Pennsylvania. And they had a plan. They convinced Tyra to call Wuornos from jail to get her talking to elicit a confession. The woman Aileen loved. The one person she actually trusted. Okay? That's where it feels like breaking. Okay? The one person like Aileen had felt safe, loved, and that she felt like she could truly trust in all of her life became the instrument of her downfall. Okay? And it worked. Wuornos confessed. She said it all. 7 murders. 7 men died by her hand. But she did not confess to cold-blood murder. She did not say like she went out of her way to kill them. She said it was self-defense. She said for the life, she was just trying to protect her life. According to Aileen, every single one of these men had tried to rape her or had actually raped her. She claimed she shot them to protect herself and that she had no choice. It was a situation of either killing them or being killed. Given her story, given what she had survived as a child and as a sex worker, this explanation gained some traction with certain people. Could a woman who'd been sexually abused her entire life, been in abusive relationships and situations her entire life, could she have snapped when faced with more violence? Is she innocent? Are we blaming the wrong person? But the prosecution did not buy it. The prosecution was like, yeah, 7 is a bit too many. 7 different men. All of them are rapists. All of them required lethal force. Remember, as I said, most of them had been shot between 4 to 6 times. 4 to 6 times. When you're trying to bring up the defense of self-defense in criminal matters, this is an area which I know, so let me cook. When you're bringing self-defense as a defense for committing a crime, especially in murder situations, it needs to be reasonable. So the amount of force that you put in while defending yourself, it needs to be reasonable. Would a reasonable person use this amount of force that you used in this specific situation? Okay, so in a situation where maybe you had to shoot someone, shooting someone once, yeah, understandable. But 4 times, but 5 times, but 6 times in self-defense, that does not seem like somebody who's trying to defend themselves. And again, where they were being shot, the torso, the back, and the head. These are critical areas where, if you shoot someone in this particular areas, most likely they're gonna lose their lives. But if you say you were trying to defend yourself and you shot somebody, maybe in the leg, this was maybe a way to stop them from running after you and gives you time to run away. That might be understandable. That might, get accepted in a court. But 7 times, 6 times, to the head, to the torso, and to 7 different men, all from the same state, but different walks of life, different careers, different professions. How are all of them rapists? The prosecution saw a pattern. This was not a self-defense. This was murder. And this was robbery. Because again, remember, after killing this man, she stole from them and pawned off their belongings. If again it was self-defense, wouldn't you have tried to run away and not take anything from these aggressors? Okay, so now I'm just trying to bring you to what the questions the prosecutions and possibly the court was asking themselves. She took their cars, she pawned off belongings, and it didn't happen once or twice. It kept happening. She kept killing more people, 7 to be exact. Volusia County, Florida. That's where Aileen Wuornos stood trial, represented by Chief Assistant Public Defender Tricia Jenkins. She only stood trial once for the murder of Richard Mallory. For the other 6, her attorney Stephen Glazer arranged for her to plead no contest or guilty. The prosecution, led by State's Attorney John Turner, built their case methodically. The physical evidence, the stolen items, the fingerprints. I told you about this, the CCTV camera in the storage unit, the pattern of victims. Judge Uriel Blount presided over the trial, and the outcome felt inevitable from the start. The prosecution had so much evidence, it was basically a done deal. Wuornos' defense tried to present evidence of her traumatic childhood, her abuse, her sexual exploitation, and I'm in no way trying to say that these things are not true. All of these things happened. Her biological aunt and stepsister, Lori Grody, was called to testify. So was her biological uncle and stepbrother, Barry Wuornos. The state wanted the jury to understand that, yes, she indeed had a difficult childhood. We are not contesting that. Aileen has probably had one of the most horrific childhoods in true crime history. But is having a troubled childhood excuse you for committing 7 murders? Does that excuse you for killing 7 men? Depriving people of 7 families of a brother, of a son, of a father, of a grandfather? Does it? The jury did not take long. Guilty for first-degree murder. And the sentence? In Florida, death. She was convicted of murdering Richard Mallory on December 1st, 1989, plus robbery with a firearm. And then came the plea deals for the other 6 murders. 6 more death sentences stacked on top of each other. Aileen Wuornos spent over 10 years on Florida's death row. First at Broward Correctional Institute for 6 years, then at Florida State Prison. And during those years, something happened to her. She changed. Or maybe it was just something that was always inside her became visible. She started giving interviews. She started writing letters to a childhood friend named Dawn Botkins. She listened to Natalie Martin's album, Tiger Lily, over and over again, particularly the song Carnival. When the documentary filmmaker Nick Broomfield came to interview her, she seemed at times lucid and at times completely detached from reality. She talked about killing in self-defense. Then later she'd say she killed them in cold blood. Her story kept changing. Like she just couldn't remember what was the truth. She could not distinguish what was fact and what was fiction. Or maybe at this point, she didn't care, because at this point she has 7 death sentences. By 2002, Aileen Wuornos just wanted to die. She just wanted to end everything. She fired her attorneys. She stopped her appeals. Florida Governor Jeb Bush ordered a psychiatric examination to determine if she was mentally competent enough to be executed. And the doctor said yes. She understood what was happening. She just wanted it to happen. She wanted to basically finish everything. October 9th, 2002, Florida State Prison. Aileen Carol Wuornos, 46 years old. She gets executed through lethal injection at 9:47 a.m. in the morning. Witnesses watched from the execution chamber, and according to reports, she smiled as she faced her final moments. What were her last words? Quote, "I'd like just to say, I'm sailing with a rock, and I'll be back. Like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all." Nobody knew what to make of that. Years later, some people are still trying to, wrap their head around this. Was it a movie reference? Was it just her being delusional? Or was it just a big FU moment? A final act of defiance against a world that never made sense to her. A world that never showed any remorse or any emotion of love or peace to her. Whatever it meant, those were her last words. The last words of America's first female serial killer. She was the 10th woman executed in the United States since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. After her death, her body was cremated. Her childhood friend, Dawn Botkins, scattered her ashes beneath a tree in Michigan, back where it all began. Here's what makes the Aileen Aileen case endlessly fascinating and sort of unsettling. She didn't fit the profile. So serial killers in America have always been men, or mostly have been men. Think about Ted Bundy. Think about all these people. Most of them are men, and they are usually white. Not saying that other races have not had, prolific serial killers, but they are usually white men. Okay? They often have specific psychological patterns, specific victims, usually the most vulnerable members in society, mostly women or young children. But Aileen Wuornos was a woman. She was a sex worker. She was a lesbian, someone who'd been victimized her entire life before becoming a victimizer. So this case raised questions that still don't have clean-cut answers. If you're born into abuse, if you're molested as a child, if you're kicked out at 14, remember, if you began selling your body at 11, if you became pregnant at 14 due to working as a sex worker, if you're forced to live this life of the only way to make ends meet is by selling your body, whose responsibility is this? Who should we be blaming? When does a victim have a right to become a perpetrator? At what point does the trauma become too much? At what point do we blame the trauma, or when do we use the trauma as an explanation or as an excuse? Some people see Aileen Wuornos as one thing and one thing alone. She's a monster. She's a cold-blooded killer who murdered seven men for money and played the victim card when she got arrested. Others see her as a product of systemic failure. She was failed by the system from the get-go. She was failed by her family. She was failed by society. She was failed by you and me, because we are part of the system whether we like it or not. She was failed by her neighbors. She was failed by every single system that you and I have depend on pretty much every single day to protect us. She was failed by them. And then after decades of this numerous ways of being abused, of this numerous occurrences of just trauma being dumped on her, she decides, you know what? Fuck it. Fuck the system. Fuck this society. Fuck this family. You know what? I am gonna become the predator. I have become the prey too much. She decides to fight back. The problem is that her fighting back meant 7 men lose their lives. The self-defense claim haunts this case. So did these men really rape her? Because, dead men tell no tales. Aileen stood by the fact that she was raped, or some of them attempted to rape her and then, tried to defend herself. Was she telling the truth about any of them? Was it like one tried to rape her, or 2 failed? Was it one who did actually manage to take advantage of her? Richard Mallory, her first victim, turned out to have a history of sexual violence. That detail emerged too late after her first trial. If it had come to light, if it was discovered earlier on, would this have changed everything? Would it had made the jury see, okay, maybe let's give her a benefit of doubt? And as you know, in criminal cases, before you get convicted, it's supposed to be beyond reasonable doubt. Would having known that one of her victims had a history of sexual violence, would this have changed everything? Would this have changed anything? Okay? Would a jury believed her if they known at least, one of her victims had a history of attacking women? Sadly, we will never know. That case was more than 20 years ago, and that's what makes this story so frustrating. The truth got buried somewhere between Aileen constantly changing her records or changing what her description of what happened and the physical evidence. Nobody really knows what happened between Aileen and those 7 men. In 2003, actress Charlize Theron transformed herself into Aileen Wuornos for the film Monster. She gained weight, wore prosthetic teeth, and disappeared into the role so completely that she won an Academy Award for Best Actress. The film presented a somewhat sympathetic version of Wuornos. You can check it out, showing her relationship with Tyra Moore, renamed Selby in the film, and depicting her first murder as legitimate self-defense that spiraled into something far darker. Documentary filmmaker Nick Broomfield made not 1 but 2 documentaries about Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos, The Selling of a Serial Killer in 1992, and Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer in 2003, which included footage of her final days on death row. When Natalie Marchant found out about that Wuornos had been listening to Carnival repeatedly before her execution and that Broomfield wanted to use this part in the documentary, she gave permission. She later said that she was disturbed by the film but felt the song belonged there somehow. And now decades later, Netflix has released Aileen, Queen of Serial Killers, bringing her story to a new generation. And as of course, many articles have been written about her, many YouTube videos have been made about her, numerous podcasts have been made about her. Because apparently we cannot stop talking about her. It's just so interesting, to put it simply. We still can't figure out what she was. Was she a monster or a victim? Was she a predator or a prey? Where is the distinction? Where does one begin and where does one end? Or maybe she was both. Maybe she was something in between that modern society does not have words for. The Aileen Wuornos case doesn't have a neat conclusion. It doesn't wrap up with a beautiful red bow and teaches a clear lesson about, bad people and, being evil and that good always wins. What it does is force us to sit with probably the most uncomfortable questions on gender, violence, abuse, and accountability. At the end of the day, 7 men are dead. That's a fact. Aileen Wuornos killed them. That's also a fact. Whether those killings were acts of self-defense or premeditated murder depends on who you ask and what evidence they choose to back them up. What's undeniable is that Aileen Wuornos lived a life that most of us can't possibly imagine. From the moment she was born and brought into this world, to the moment that she said the final words and they injected her with lethal chemicals. Her existence was defined by violence, trauma, and the need to survive. She never had a chance, but then again, neither did Richard Mallory, neither did David Spears, neither did Charles, Troy, Dick, Peter, or Walter. And that's the thing about true crime. These stories don't resolve the way fiction does. This is not a wonderfully written New York's bestseller novel which has a strict plotline where things end up in a way that, you can live with. No. There's no moment where everything starts making sense. It's just questions after question after question. And even I, as I was doing this research, it just leaves more questions than actual answers. But Aileen Wuornos is gone now. Her ashes were scattered 20 plus years ago under a Michigan tree. Nobody will ever hear her voice again unless you check out, recordings of them. But her story keeps on living. It keeps getting told. It keeps forcing people to ask, what do we do with someone who was destroyed before they destroyed others? How do we balance empathy with justice? How do we resolve this conflicting ideology of when do we allow a prey to become a predator? And where do we draw a line before excusing somebody's behavior? Sadly, I don't have those answers. I'm not sure anyone, has them. But maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the most important thing about the story. Maybe those are the most important stories that we should keep on telling. They're the ones that leaves people with questions instead of certainties. The ones that make us uncomfortable in our skin. The ones that refuse to let us forget them. The ones that make sure we remember real people died and a real person killed them, and both matters are true and equal. That's the story of Aileen Wuornos. No easy answers, no clear endings with, a moral or a moral teaching. Just this complicated, messy, tragic reality of what happens when someone who was never given a chance finally decides to take what she believes she deserves. That's the harrowing story of Aileen Wuornos. Thank you for watching and listening. I'll see you in the next one.